by John Flemington.
Reality split with a noise like tearing flesh. Before Lieutenant Takar's eyes, 3 jagged blades pushed into existence in the engineering room, as something ripped a path into the material realm. For a moment, the White Scar's superhuman reflexes failed him, and he froze as the horror before him took shape. Then it leapt, and he instinctively span to avoid the slashing claws. Warp Talon, he thought, as his training kicked in. The warrior wore the midnight blue of the Night Lords, and lightning crackled from the sharpened edges of his armor. The bolt carbines of Infiltrator Squad Zuzak opened up as more of the heretic Astartes tore their way into reality, concussive echoes ringing out in the close confines. Takar brought his weapon to his shoulder and fired a short burst of shots at his foe, as the warp talon closed again. Ceramic fragments flew from his target's pauldron, but the warrior was hardly slowed by the impacts. Takar's desperate parry saved him from being gutted by the warp talon's charge, but momentum bore him to the deck nonetheless. Sparks flew as his foe's lightning claws carved up the plating to either side of him. He drew a combat blade and buried it between the plates that guarded the warrior's guts. As the warp talon convulsed, Takar pushed the wounded attacker aside and rolled to his feet. He swung his carbine up and put 2 bolt rounds into the Chaos Space Marine's helm, which burst open in a crimson bloom. Before him was a scene of horror. The warp assassins had cut down several of Squad Zuzak, and white-armoured bodies lay torn and scattered on the deck plating. The remainder of the infiltrators were retreating, backing down the corridor which led to the ship's primary reactor. Their guns lay down disciplined covering fire, but the warp talons were too fast. Before Takar could react, another of the Night Lord warriors fired his jump pack briefly, boosting forward to impale Brother Hyogen upon his jagged claws.
Enemy assault troops on Engineerium Deck 4, aft bulkhead 16,
Takar voxed to the other White Scar's forces aboard the Warhawk.
Heavy casualties. Avoid engaging at Blade's range.
Ignoring his own advice, the lieutenant rushed towards the fiend hunched over Brother Hyogen. This enemy wore no helm, and his pallid face was set in a rictus grin as he looked up from his victim.
Your kin make poor sport, White Scar,
the Chaos Space Marine hissed, withdrawing his claws from Hyogen's torso in a welter of blood. As Takar roared and drew his remaining knife, he saw the dying warrior's arm twitch. Then the crack grenade in Hyogen's hand detonated, and the warp talon and his victim were lost in a blinding explosion.
You fought well, Tuskelar.
Sit down. Shogadar Khan sat in a low chair in his personal chambers. Smoke drifted up from an incense bowl set on the table before him. Takar had repaired the worst of the damage to his armor, but its servos grated as he took the indicated seat. He studied his commander's face. The master of recruits had already worn the scars of 100 battles when Takar had passed the test of tempering and joined the chapter proper, yet the White Scar's voyage into the debris field known as the Tears of the Emperor seemed to have aged him further. Takar understood. The ship they pursued, the hated Nightmare of Selix, broadcast the tortured screams of astropaths captured by the Night Lords in a near-constant stream. This soul-searing barrage warred all the sons of the Great Khan.
You believe we are being outplayed by the traitors, Takar?
The Khan continued, staring into the glowing embers of incense.
3 more brothers fell today, my Khan. The Night Lords attack us at every turn. They send a handful of warriors against a brotherhood each time, and when we halt the next attack, they flee. There is no victory. You'll feel every cut we are dealt as if it was carved into your own skin,
Jogada replied.
This is good, but perhaps the hunter must push on despite his wounds. Of course, but we seem no closer to finding our quarry. They lured us into this asteroid field, and now the only traces we find of their route are those they choose to show us. With Solani's guidance we might run them to ground, but alone.
Stormseer Solani had been confined to his sanctorium since the White Scars hunt began. The psychic screams of the Nightmare of Selix tore at his mind, and it took all of his will to hold on to his consciousness. Jogada looked up, meeting Takar's stare through the coiling smoke.
Ours is not an easy path, he said levelly, but we were not made for easy paths. I too feel our seer's absence keenly, but I know what he would say if he were with us. We are the Wind Brother. These traitors think to break our will, but no one can check the wind.
Takar ducked beneath the swing of the Terminator's mace, slicing at the pipes under its breastplate. He stepped back out of range of the warrior's tusked helm, covering his retreat with bursts from his bolt carbine. How many more of these ambushes could the strike force survive? The Terminator's midnight plate was barely marked by the mass-reactive bolts, and the warrior lumbered towards him, relentless. Behind it, 4 more of the behemoths advanced to surround him. Stepping backwards, the lieutenant stumbled over the body of a crippled infiltrator. The Terminator hefted his mace. Energy crackled around the weapon's head as Takar groped for the grenades in his belt. Then, an explosive round cracked into the Terminator's eye lens, spraying brain matter across Takar's visor. The towering Chaos Space Marine sagged, slipping to its knees. Takar leapt aside before it crashed into the deck, then glanced to his left, down the dimly lit access corridor. His optics allowed him to make out 3 Eliminators at its far end, crouched in the shadows. More fire snapped out, and another of the Night Lords fell.
"Strike!"
came Yogada's voice, as the captain leapt from an overhead gantry to slam into a reeling Terminator. His sword flashed, and blood poured from his target's torso in a flood. The Reavers of Squad Bortal dropped with him, heavy bolt pistols barking at point-blank range. In moments, the remaining Terminators had fallen, and Takar joined in his brother's cheers. Yogada Khan turned to his lieutenant. The Khan's top knot was plastered to his scalp with traitor's blood, and his eyes glittered.
These snakes thought they could outrun the wind, Takar, but no matter how fast you run, the wind is there before you.